Let the bopping begin. Hello and welcome to the HR Data Labs Brown Bag Lunch. Welcome for Friday, March 7th, 2025. Let me get this thing out of the way. That art project, we like to call it. Welcome, and thank you for Salary.com sponsoring this, and thank you to my best friend, partner in crime, Dwight Brown, for being here. Dwight, how are you?
I'm good, David. How you doing today?
I'm great. You know why I'm great?
Tell me.
Because we have our friend, Paul Reiman from NovoInsights here. Paul, how are you?
I am living the dream in a snow globe right now here in snowy Chicago.
Chicago snowing?
Oh, are you guys getting
Oh
a
my
blizzard?
God.
Not a blizzard. It is to anybody outside of the Midwest, this would be pretty. To those of us in the Midwest, this is annoying, but it's those nice, large, falling flakes.
Yeah.
So what's
It's,
fascinating about that?
Mother Nature teases you in the Midwest. Coming from Minnesota, you get to this time of year and you're like, oh, yes, we get a 50-degree day. And then the next day it's like 30,000 below zero.
And
Such a letdown. And
that's
you
why I
wonder
don't
why I
live
moved
there.
away from there.
Yeah, he moved down to sunny Phoenix, Arizona.
I actually like to say escaped.
He fell out of a plane and landed in
Yeah.
Phoenix, Arizona, which has multiple levels to it. Paul, why don't you give us a little bit about your background and what you do at NovoInsights?
Yeah, I think I'm old. I've been thinking about compensation for 25 years now.
Wow, yeah.
Um, Started fresh out of school as a consultant and spent a dozen years at three firms, all of which no longer exist because they've been bought and folded into other
Right,
brands.
right.
Then went in-house and ran rewards and HR ops teams at three different sort of tech or fintech companies. And when the last one was sold to private equity, I decided that was a ride I didn't want to be on
Mm,
and started the firm, started NovoInsights with the mission of I saw this gap between kind of how consultants thought and how practitioners really needed things to work. And having spent time in-house, I realized I gave some advice in the first wave of my career I would have done differently,
yeah.
having to actually have to live with those conclusions. So started the firm to bridge that gap and be, a better partner to people trying on this journey.
And one of the brilliant things about Paul, if you don't follow him on social media, you really should, is that he has really interesting insights about the different industries that we all focus on within the HR world, especially in terms of compensation. And he does a good job of clarifying not only the process, but what technology is available for what process. And I think all of us who are in the HR technology and compensation space really look to Paul for a lot of his insights there. So thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. That was part of the bridging the gap problem I saw was there's lots of discussion about like the things we build, but not necessarily the tools we use to build them. And there's been this incredible explosion of comp tech and clarifying that for people.
And that's why people really do need a person like you, like being the analyst for that compensation world,
Yeah.
to be able to tell them the direction to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
So follow Paul Reiman on especially LinkedIn. But if you haven't seen him on World at Work or some of the other sites, he has unique insights for that.
Yeah.
But Paul, before we get started on our podcast today, we wanted to ask you, what's one thing that you did for the last time? No, what's the last thing you did for the first time? I still get it confused, Dwight. I have to write it
You
down.
need to write it down.
I
I
need a
know.
sticky
I,
note on
I
my
get
computer.
confused too.
Totally. So I think I'm a pretty boring person, actually. Like my wife calls me a nerd. I'm
Mhm.
actually kind of proud of that. And the last thing I did for
It's
the
okay.
first time was to shut down a club. So my sister got married over the weekend, and I was that old guy who managed to hang out with the youngins until they shut us down.
Wow. That is
Oh,
laudable.
that sounds like a 3-day. That sounds like a 3-day hangover to me.
And you're talking to us today. You made it to Friday.
That's probably why I'm the most proud, is I made it and I wasn't totally destroyed for a week after.
Wow.
Listen, I can't get
That
through
is
a
impressive.
weekend of doing chores and then wake up on a Monday morning and not feel like hungover. And that's without drinking any alcohol, by the way.
Yeah, I mean, my calves were sore from them playing jump around and me being a bit inappropriate. Like, I wasn't without harm. It's just I was at least functional pretty quickly thereafter. So,
Oh my
Just
God,
total
that brings
kudos.
back memories. The memories that
So kudos,
jump
dude.
around, jump
Jump
around,
around,
jump up,
indeed.
totally.
That's
get it
going to be
down.
the theme song for this podcast. Jump around. And
That
while
that's
we
the
say
best
that,
one so far.
that
I
is
got to give you that.
that is a really good one. And for those of you who haven't heard the others, you have to go and listen to the others and the confessions that we've heard. So
Yeah, exactly.
so
I feel
let's
like I should be wearing the white collar.
you really
Yeah.
should.
Yeah,
Yeah. Well, then we'll call you Father.
exactly.
All right.
Monsignor.
Let's transition to our podcast. Okay, let's get right into it. So what we wanted to do with Paul, because of his background, is to kind of throw it out there. Paul, compensation's changed a lot, especially you talked about 25 years. I've been at 35 years, and it seems pretty day and night from when, when we started. If I just throw it out to you, what are the things you've really seen that kind of have moved the most in those 25 years?
Yeah. Let me start with something that hasn't changed, which is we're still dealing with people, right? So this age-old problem of humans are our customer, that's still the same. What's changed is the amount of information that is surrounding them and available to us, and the tools with which we can process that information. Some of that's been forced, right? Governments, states,
Right.
countries telling us you're going to share this information. Some of it's been innovators publishing information. Some of it's been social media sites sending me an email every Monday morning telling me what I'm worth. But like those mechanisms have evolved, and that's the biggest change for me. It's just the fluidity of information in our market, and how do you get people to understand that and manage it and handle it.
Yeah, and because it's a flood, what's noise and what's real, right? What's insight and what's just absolute spam?
And there's a lot of spam, right? I mean, there's a lot of information that it's hard to know how helpful it can be. But in any moment, because we're all humans, it might feel very real, right? That day that LinkedIn sent me a message and said I was worth more than what my salary was, that felt pretty darn real, even though I'm not sure I could go out and get an offer for that tomorrow, right? But it felt real in the moment. So was that spam? Was that reality? It's hard to say for sure.
Yeah. Context and perception. So much of that goes into it.
Yeah.
But I think one of the contexts we're getting in the world of HR, and especially in the world of compensation, comes from our consumerism, or comes from the consumer side. So that same email that you got about yourself and how valuable you were, I get that same email about how my 2013 Porsche Cayenne is now worth $5,000. So, we say, well, wait a minute. So what's the context of that? Do I sell it? Can I sell it to a person for $5? Can I sell it to a dealer for $5? Just like you saying, the LinkedIn or whomever saying that you might be worth more. What's the context? Could you go out and get a job for more? Is that available?
Right. Exactly.
How do I action it?
That's right. So I think the availability of data is by far the biggest change, right? 25 years ago, I was pulling surveys off a shelf, quite literally in paper and hand.
The big books.
Yeah. Now,
Binders.
thankfully, I was hand entering the data into a spreadsheet. So, at least my career started in the age, but that was new at that point, right? The concept of processing information. Now, I hope nobody publishes a binder anymore. It's,
They still do.
Yeah. And shame on them, right? Because they're processing it electronically first before they put it into a binder and send it.
But that's actually a really interesting point, though, because there are still some processes. Like, for example, when you get a visa for an overseas, when you're sponsoring someone for an overseas visa, you need to prove that person is going to be paid a wage range that's relative
Yeah.
to the market. Well, you can't use electronic forms of that. You actually have to use a page from a survey.
Yeah, it's ridiculous, but yeah.
So you do need the binder still, even though that sounds crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still
Yeah,
necessary.
that's right. So it totally changed, and not to mention because the speed of data, the speed of and the ability to process and store data has changed. There's just so many choices, right? That we talked about the sort of marketscape that we do already, but you know, I don't think there were nearly this many choices around where can I go to get information about compensation as there are today.
And you mentioned that technology was where you were entering the data into a spreadsheet, and that was new. And we really thought that we were so advanced back then, where we were able to do the combinations or taking the different jobs and combining them together and creating a composite record. We're still doing that today. We're now doing it in the compensation system like Comp Analyst or others,
Hmm.
but we're still doing the same thing. So let me transition though from crazy amounts of data to now technology that really hasn't changed very much because the
Mm,
process really hasn't changed very much.
yeah. I do think, we're starting to see vendors and practitioners challenging some of the assumptions that have held us in that world. So, for example, surveys are the gold standard.
Right.
Are they really? Like, what's different about survey data versus a predictive model that uses surveys, that uses other data points to inform what might be a competitive rate of pay?
Hmm.
5 years ago, people would have said that's black magic. Right now, there's gaining acceptance for my analyst pulling numbers out of insert your favorite brand of survey
Right.
probably gets
Yeah.
me a pretty similar outcome to this predictive model that really smart people have spent years
Right.
refining and developing.
Hmm.
So that change of assumption is going to change the types of tools we use. There's still a place for survey management. There's still a place for
Absolutely.
surveys, but
Hmm.
the capabilities that used to matter a lot around aging data by country, by vendor, matter less if the
Right.
model already does all that for you and it's saying, no, this is what you want to pay a senior software engineer in Chicago, Illinois.
Yeah.
So I think the technology is realizing that there's more traction and acceptance for new methods of benchmarking, market management, range creation, and then the technology has to keep up. And I see that every day when I talk to vendors in the space where, they're simplifying the way you talk about this because you can, given the way
Right.
that data is being processed now.
Well, and you think about the impact of HI or of AI or potential impact more than anything. So, imagine the time in the future where not only do you have the numbers that are the HR reported numbers, but AI is able to pull in all this other data
Yeah.
that you
Mhm.
wouldn't even think of as data that starts to provide that context and starts to guide your perception at the same time.
Yep.
We're probably not there yet, but it seems like we're kind of on the cusp of it.
Well, with pay transparency, we're closer, right? Because you
Right.
can actually look at um, the the market based on what's in Indeed or LinkedIn, based on what job postings say.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And while that's you know giving that money to new people, it's not paying people in jobs today. It's a different source of data. I think, Paul, that's what we were talking about, right? We have to accept different forms of data.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. I do find, yeah, the robots are going to do most of what I did 25 years ago real fast. We've already built some AI driven models that do a pretty good job of matching. It's like the equivalent of a, 6 months of experience analyst.
Mm.
That's pretty
Mm,
good
yeah.
for AI at this stage.
Yeah.
And where those models have struggled up till now is leveling. It's really good at finding a
Right.
functional match, right? I could read a job description and I could say, yeah, that's probably a compensation job. It's been
Hmm.
bad at deciding how big of a job it is.
Yeah.
Posting data helps illuminate that quite a bit because it helps the robot learn these words are correlated with bigger rates of pay. So as that corpus grows and as more things that help connect dots, I think
Right.
that automation is going to make it really easy to match and value jobs very rapidly.
Hmm.
Yeah, my hope is that we can start to leverage the people to do more of the strategic work around it. And instead of them spending their time doing the matching or validating the matching, they're looking at what the outcomes are, and then being able to provide
Yep.
managers with better insight as to, well, what does this really look like? Or what better decisions can you make with this?
Yep.
Because they're swimming in a world of data, as you said before. Now they need a lifeguard to help them not
Yeah.
drown in all that data. Sorry for
Right.
the
Yeah. No,
alliteration.
we studied, we do this, we've done it twice now, like where we try to benchmark how big should your comp team be. And one of the
Mm.
questions we ask is, do you feel overstaffed, understaffed? Nobody feels overstaffed, and we were looking for correlations of what makes you less likely to feel understaffed. And one of the hypotheses I had, which was proven completely false,
Mm.
was that the less data you have, the less understaffed you'll feel. So the more I'm spending time in the mechanics of matching and benchmarking, I'm going to feel like that's a lot of work. That's not the case. And
Right.
when I talk to some leaders, they're like, that's actually not the part that I wish I could clone. It's my ability to talk to people.
Yeah.
And every
Right.
manager who has questions, how do I answer their questions? So my hope, and I believe it will be true, is that, the time that we can save from an analyst digging through data can be redeployed to those conversations and helping that manager who only hires one person a year think about the right way to pay fairly in
Right.
that hire situation rather than trusting that they'll figure it out, which is largely what we do today.
Well, and there's also the promotion situations. There's the salary increase
Mm-hmm.
situations. There's the design situations of a group. There are so many ways comp people
Yeah.
can be deployed to be able to help make better decisions on things with the vastness and sea of data around them.
Yeah.
Hey, did we ever think about having comp people as part of a workforce planning conversation?
Right.
Where are we going to
Right.
put that?
What a
Where are we going to put?
concept.
Yeah, where are we going to put that in the warehouse? Well, let's not put the warehouse someplace where the land is cheap, but wages are going to be really expensive because we can't find people.
Right.
Well, let's go put the warehouse over there where there's a ton of land where I can buy for nothing. Great road systems, whatever. Yeah, there's nobody who lives there.
Right.
You can buy moose. You can have moose that work the plant. Yeah,
That's a new form of labor replacement.
Yeah.
Like all the
Where
discussion
did
about
that come from?
automation,
You can have a moose. What the
you're going to
heck?
create a
You know,
moose union
go
to
up to
organize
Maine.
to.
The
Go up to
moose
Maine. There are more
union.
moose than there are people. No
Yeah.
offense to the people in Maine, but
The moose teamsters, 1, 2, 3.
they get paid in antlers.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's transition a little bit. So we've talked a little bit about the data. We've talked a little bit about the technology. Let's talk a little bit about the skills, though, that comp
Mm.
people have. Because in the old days, comp people's skills really revolved around matching jobs and Excel spreadsheets and being able to create budgets and. But don't you see that the skill of a comp person now has to take on a completely different kind
Yeah.
of area?
Yeah. I do. It's actually, I was smiling because we were talking about this yesterday. I'm giving a presentation at World at Work, plug World at Work, about how to manage your team. Like if you're a comp leader, like how do you think about the size of it, the structure of it, what good looks like, operating metrics, things like that. And I was looking back at a presentation that my good friend Brian Briscoe and I did in 2018 at a Future of
Oh,
Work forum about what do we think the comp team of the future looks like. It's always dangerous to look back at your predictions from that long ago, right? Um,
7 years.
7 years. And the big theme of it was we need to stop being tacticians and
Mm,
start being problem solvers,
we've always
which
said that.
I think is proven to be true, right? From
Yeah,
the standpoint, it's not about can you benchmark the job. Automation's going to take care of that. It's more about can you see an issue, a variety of data
Hmm.
points, be it feedback, be it business metrics, be it attrition, be it market information, and go, okay, this is something we need to talk about and develop alternatives and solutions and
Right.
message them and advocate for them. Like that's the big pivot.
yeah,
It's not just being that you ask me for data, I go get it and give it to you because
right.
I know how to do that.
Mhm.
That's not the job anymore. It's that problem solving is where already best comp teams are spending their time, and it's going to be the only place to spend time in the future.
And we definitely see that on a daily basis from a consulting perspective. It's an ongoing challenge. You're working
Mhm.
with clients, you've got the data, and they're either asking the question, well, how did you arrive at the data? Or they're asking the question, what do I do with it?
Right.
Those are
Mhm.
two totally different skill sets, you know? And I think that that factors into comp people, comp teams,
Yeah.
and you know, to your point, being able to, what do you do with what you have, and can you think strategically around it?
Yep.
I'm going to call a little bit of a timeout though. I want to pick your brain on something. I'm not going to say that comp people are lazy because they're not. They're working their ass off on tactics because they have to. I think what we tend to get though is an underinvestment in technology,
Hmm.
like the software that salary.com sells. That wasn't meant to be a plug. That it was meant
Good
to be,
plug.
but we don't see organizations going that direction because they say, well, wait a minute, Excel does a lot of this stuff for us. We can do it all in Excel.
Right.
But that laziness, it's not laziness. They don't realize that comes at a cost. There's errors, there's
Yeah.
maintenance, there's inaccuracy. There's a lot of things that Excel can't do for you, and therefore they still have to be in the tactics of getting all that stuff done because they don't have the technology
Yeah.
to be able to help them
Mhm.
bridge that gap to strategy.
Yeah.
Am I way off base there?
No, you're definitely right. And when we did our kind of market insight survey about how are comp teams using technology, the biggest finding was the time savings that comes, right?
Right.
We weren't hearing people say, I have a smaller comp team because I deployed technology. It's not that kind of ROI. It's a we spend less time doing it. I think the risk is a real issue that people don't think about. Doing survey submissions in Excel files is the riskiest thing most comp
Yeah.
teams do every year
Yeah.
because there's spreadsheets of my information floating around from payroll to me to somebody else.
Right.
Heaven forbid I'm emailing
Mhm.
it. Um, and then scalability is the other one, right? It's
Right.
easy to build a spreadsheet for one data source to, automatically surface what's the market for a job. That gets incrementally more difficult, maybe even exponentially more difficult if you want to add a second data source or a
Right.
third, let
Right.
alone one that's structured differently.
Right.
So that's what software is good at that spreadsheets are not. So
Mhm.
you end up being less flexible, less agile if you're looking to just manage it in a spreadsheet. Is it good enough for today? Yes, but you're not going to be able to change as quickly, and you get trapped in that transactional race.
Exactly.
One of the things that I think with that is, to a certain extent, comp people end up being behind the scenes people for a lot of organizations. One of
Hmm.
the organization I came from did a total reorg of the department, and I worked with the HR business partner, and a big piece of that was working on the compensation for the new positions. And I had no idea where the compensation came from, how they got it. It was just somebody in a back office doing the tactician stuff, and HR saying, trust us on
Hmm.
this. And I think to make that move that you're talking about, or to bridge that gap that you're talking about, somehow we got to get out of the back room. And I don't know, that's tough.
Yeah.
My perspective on this though, Dwight, is that transparency leads comp people to have to lead.
Hmm.
And the reason is because now you can have HR say, "Hey, comp, why don't you explain this to the inside world? Why don't you explain this to our stakeholders instead of making me do it because I'm going to butcher it? Why don't you use your skills, use all those skills that you have, comp team, especially the communication ones, to tell people why they should trust this and what's it for and why are we doing this?"
Mm.
Or better yet, hey, comp person, we're starting this process. I want you to come in and find out as much as you can about this area and do your thing as a comp person and be that
Yeah.
face to.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think those are two totally different things, two totally different scenarios.
Yeah. I agree. I think I was talking to some leaders over the past few months, trying to figure out like what's hard for you, like what's the most difficult thing you and your comp team have to do. When do you feel less successful? What's that negative feedback you get that you wish you didn't get all the time?
Mhm.
And it's really, it comes down to when they have to be injected into a problem rather than deployed to a solution. So
Yeah.
go explain pay transparency. Yeah, it's less back officey, but we've still turned that into a largely tactical discussion,
Mhm.
right? We
Right.
post these
Hmm.
ranges in these states because they're
Yep.
required. Here's where those numbers come from. Here's what you should or shouldn't read into about those numbers. Like we're
Yeah.
answering it very FAQ but live style. Where
Right.
people feel less successful is we are reorganizing this part of the organization. We're thinking about, moving these jobs to a lower cost location, automating this, but we know that we're going to need some leaders to help drive that, help us think about the cost of human capital that we're deploying into the
Right.
situation. Now I have to know, like, well, how does this business run? What is the work they're actually
Right.
doing?
Yeah.
What can
Exactly.
automation bring to it? Is there labor available in lower cost location? Like all of those questions is when comp leaders go, oh, my team's not ready for that.
Right.
Right? That's the back
Yep.
out of the back room part I think you're describing, Dwight. It's that like I'm a
Yeah.
partner to that leader thinking through a real business problem with my expertise, thinking about how people are
Right.
paid.
Yeah.
we had a
Exactly.
we had a comment on the LinkedIn Live. It said that very rarely have compensation folks attended client meetings jointly with HRBPs. I agree with that, and I think it's
Hmm.
high time, to your point, Paul, that we use our voices. We use we emerge some skills here of
Mm,
communications and
Hmm.
work with the BPs to really figure out how do I satisfy the need that they have and that their clients have, and how do I translate these things into English
yeah,
or whatever
Right.
else, whatever language it needs to be, but translate it into their
yeah,
language,
yeah.
so that they can understand why we did what we did.
Yeah, I think some of it, I don't know if you're a follower of Josh Bersin, but like his concept of systemic HR, right? How
Hmm.
HR needs to become kind of this interwoven, less
Yeah.
departmentalized thing. I think that's
Hmm.
true for comp too, in the same way. Like we have to figure out how to be a little bit more integrated and interwoven into
Yeah.
these business decisions. And
Yeah.
it never dawned on me until I had to run M&A for a company, like being the
Yeah.
HR point person for M&A, where now you're at the table thinking about not just HR, not just how to pay and how to integrate, but like
Hmm.
they got to have expense reports to submit. And when do you do that? And how does that sync up with when you want to convert them to new systems? So the light bulb
Right.
went off for me around how do you bring, people ops and comp expertise to a broader table. It was
Hmm.
just eye opening that, oh, this is what we haven't been doing. Like we've been sitting back saying, yeah, they're under market. You're gonna have to give them a raise. That wasn't value add.
Right.
I needed to be at that table, to discuss things a little bit deeper.
Yeah.
And sometimes that table happens to be for, like you say, M&A. Sometimes it happens to be for, hey, how are we going to deal with this transparency thing? Sometimes
Sure.
it's a, hey, we need to start rethinking our business strategy because we're losing business, where our revenue is in the tank.
Hmm.
Could you imagine? Those are really useful conversations to have, all those disciplines sitting down, breaking down those silos, but rarely do they happen until it's too late.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask one more question before we go. We only have a couple minutes left. This is going to be, think of it as a lightning round. Transparency, good or bad?
Good.
Pay equity, alive or dead?
Alive.
DE&I, alive or dead?
Alive, but in the shadows.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Mm.
hopefully it's been built into everything. But sorry, I digress. Performance management, alive or dead?
Alive, very much so.
Good, good, good. Pay for performance, alive or dead?
Ooh, decreasing, but not dead.
Merit increases as a part of that.
Maybe that's the decreasing part.
Yeah. Yes. Short-term incentives, alive or dead?
Alive.
Long-term incentives, alive or dead?
Ooh, coma, like life support, like really struggling depends on the org. I try not to say it depends ever. I was trying to keep it to single
Mummified.
word. Yeah, that's
Mummified, yeah. Well, That's really interesting because we're actually seeing a lot of work come up on long-term incentive programs. So
Yeah.
Well, I think
fascinating.
that's where my hesitation came from, which is there are people getting out of the game, there's people trying to get into the game, and there are those that realize it's necessary, but that their current strategy doesn't work. So there's
Mm,
a lot of change happening around how do you use long-term incentives, particularly as PE has bought more and more
yeah,
firms.
exactly.
It means something
Right.
different. So I think
Right.
that's where I hesitated with the binary choice of alive or dead. It's hurting, but it's there.
Paul, we could actually have
Yeah.
an entire episode based on just that,
Yes,
but we'll have to
Yeah.
make that wait until the next time because we're
that's
at our
fair.
time. Paul,
There you go.
well, first, Dwight, thank you very much for being here.
Yes. Thank you. Thanks for being with us, Paul.
Yeah,
And Paul, thank you for being here. You were an amazing guest, and we're going to have you back on.
happy to do it. Absolutely. Thanks for the invite.
And thank you all for listening. Take care, stay safe, and stay tuned for our next episode. And again, thank you very much to salary.com for sponsoring us. Take care and
Thank
bye
you.
bye.